Sometimes ERP providers will create agreements that are designed for excessive change orders. So we strongly recommend investing the time and attention needed to get enough information to create a GMP agreement. Okay, this one, oh my God, this one's getting so common. It's usually due to a lack of transparency of the total cost to onboard. And when you consider a product like Netflix, when you turn on Netflix, you've got instant value. And every week, you've got new content being fed into it. That makes sense for a subscription product. But when investors came into construction, they realized the volatility of cash flow. They brought subscription models into complex business or technology implementations. ERPs are not instant value. If you're lucky, you'll get ROI within 18 months. I don't know anyone who would pay Netflix and then create the content and then wait 18 months to start benefiting from Netflix. And all you need to do is segregate the hosting and the product itself. So when you have an ERP provider that is a subscription product, negotiate a fair amount for the hosting. Listen, I'm signing on with you. Great, you're hosting. Let's come up with a nominal cost, but let's agree that the subscription for the software does not start until we're live. Go live is when we're paying payroll through the system, when we're paying bills, when we're posting to the GL. Oh, and I want to make sure that all of my historical AIA billings are entered in the software so I can accurately bill out retention. 4 simple milestones that both parties can agree to. When we get ourselves to that level, I'm happy to pay your subscription fee, but not until then. So when you get pressured to pay the subscription fee without going live, just remember, subscriptions were meant for instant value products. It's the shareholders and venture capitalists that brought subscriptions into complex products in order to have beautiful looking spreadsheets because they do not like the waves of cash flow in construction. Cloud cuffing. This is when they control your data. Let's say you want to move to another software and all of a sudden you don't necessarily have access to the data at the level that you need to facilitate the transfer and migration over to the new system. Smokestacking we touched on a little bit. This is when you are oversold the level of integration. So our recommendation here is to make sure that you do have a term in the agreement that says if it outlines a basic scope in the agreement, and then of course you have the performance credits if that scope is not achieved by a certain date and or milestones that you have set in place. R&D redirection. This one's more for subcontractors. A software that is designed for property management or fintech or GCs. And the sales reps start selling into a different market. So you can tell that the software isn't necessarily designed and they're just going to try and kind of fit that square peg into the round hole and try and make it work for you. That's fine if they're upfront and honest about it. But there's one key thing to remember, and that's the annual fee or subscription rate. If the ERP provider is focused more on another market, the fees that you pay on an annual basis should reflect the value or the level of attention that they are giving to you. So to make sure that happens, you ask the ERP provider to show them the last 3 years of their release notes so you can see the trend of the features and what those features or who those features benefit. At the end of that exercise, you will see that out of 3 years of enhancements, maybe 20% or 30 or 50% had a benefit to subcontractors. That will help you negotiate a more fair subscription rate or annual fee. In the justice system, we have the duty to recuse, where If there is any conflict for an officer in any investigation, we would have to step out. If there was any conflict for a judge, the judge would have to step out of the trial. The lawyer, same thing. Anybody, any public officer, if there is any risk of the public seeing that there was a conflict of interest, we would just step out of the investigation. So if you're hiring consultants, I strongly recommend separating the selection process and the implementation process. Many of them do implementations and provide custom report development services for the ERP providers that they are bringing into the sales process. So if you choose a consultant for the selection process and use that same consultant for the implementation process, there is a high risk of conflict of interest. So if you're upfront at the beginning when you're interviewing consultants, saying, hey, we're going to be hiring two, selection and implementation. Where's your strengths? What would you like to focus on? We'll interview you for that. But we don't want to have the same consultant involved in both. You know, the obvious conflict is they might create the RFP that leans towards a certain software that they know they're going to get a shit ton of development on. So just make sure that segregation happens at the beginning and you will protect your interests instead of someone else's. The obvious steps in adoption is to break down the priorities at a very high level. Very simple. Earlier, you saw that list of the 49 steps. So you simply take those 49 steps, you break them down at a high level, associate a schedule to all of the tasks, and then you break those high-level priorities into very detailed milestones. That's the obvious step, which any implementations expert is going to share with you. I'm about to share the not-so-obvious step. How we learned is kind of a three-step process. Anytime that something has to be done, the first step is, it's called norepinephrine. Your brain releases norepinephrine to make you more alert. And it speeds up your brain, makes you quicker. The next step is this focus part where that floodlight type stimulation turns into a spotlight focus, right? And then there's a process where these new neural pathways are formed, and then the final stage of learning is resting. This first step, when norepinephrine is released in your brain, it feels like anxiety. It's trying to get you up and moving, just like a caveman. There's a change in my environment. Get up and move. When you get up and move, I call it Guam, get up and move, that anxiety will actually dissipate a little. It's not anxiety, it's your brain trying to get you to do something, but most people go, oh, I don't like how that feels, and then they do nothing. So as we go to mobilization, understanding this, where they're just resisting the change a little bit, might help you just to push them a little harder and just to go over that, get over that initial feeling of anxiety. You do that, and you'll start to see a lot of movement. The final stage of the implementation is the quality control, and I'm going to share the obvious step. The obvious step is that quality control checklist, which any consultant and all of us already know what to do, but I want to share the not so obvious step. So there's a thing called Price's Law. It says human phenomenon, and that is the square root of the number of people in the group do half of the work. If you have a group of 10, 3 people are often doing half of the work and 7 are doing the rest. Seeing all the heads nod, I can see that you've experienced this. As the group gets bigger, Price's Law gets more damaging. So, if you focus all of your time and attention on the roots of your organization, the quality almost takes care of itself.